Hey Vadim, how are you doing?
Yeah, hi Adam. I'm fine. Quite exciting what will happen without all the preparations, but let's see. It's the format of
Yeah, we prepared the last 2 days. How much preparation would you like to have?
the. Yeah, let's see how it turns out. But I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, perfect. And Vadim is pronounced perfectly, or
Vadim, normal. That's normal E. I'm from
Vadim?
Ukraine. That's why that's of in Ukraine. It's Vadim,
Vadim.
but I'm
Okay,
also Russian
Vadim.
speaking.
Vadim?
Vadim, yeah, normal. Yeah,
Vadim?
yeah. That's now
Vadim.
very close.
Perfect. So Vadim, very close. I thought it's perfect.
Yeah,
Vadim. You said
yeah, yeah.
Vadim, right? It's not
It,
perfect. I always, this is my challenge, try to pronounce the first names perfectly.
I'm in Germany since 20,
Okay.
nearly 25 years, so I've heard multiple versions, so I'm quite accustomed to all of the variations and can recognize myself
Okay.
without AI tools.
Ah, very good. So, but now the most important question from the entire show is: what was your first computer?
Oh, it was some Intel computer back in 1997 at home. My mother was also programming starting from 60s. So I visited
Cool.
her job in Ukraine back then on the big republic, Soviet Union, to be then more precise. So I saw quite a lot of generations, but that was mainly for
Hmm.
gaming, kind of. But seriously started to develop in the university. So it was quite expensive stuff, but yeah, sometimes we needed that in informatics, and I had that in 97, 98. It was some Intel stuff, very slow, but I started with Pascal and all the programming languages. It was enough.
Hmm. In which programming languages your mother used? You remember?
Maybe everything, basic, COBOL, Pascal, so
Uh huh.
everything that didn't have any interface, C, C++, all the other stuff. But
Ah,
I
she was.
don't think that assembler was among them. I haven't heard that. Prolog was one of those, building relationships. So that was kind of
Wow, so the early AI back then.
yeah, the mode comes back. Yeah, the same stuff.
Yeah, and and what she built back then. So what was her job? So I mean,
So this was public organizations. They started to build software to automate things around what they are kind of the whole. Yeah, how was it? So yeah, in German you would say that öffentliche Behörde, so public organization, basically in the
ah,
financial sphere.
okay, okay. So you got 1997 an Intel machine, which is remarkable for 1990. No, I mean 1997 is quite normal. So they were around. So 1997 was JDK 11. They also had an Intel. I think Pentium 166 or something. I
Yeah.
guess. And yeah, and you wanted to have an Intel for or the PC for gaming.
No, I was in the university, and it was kind of mixture of mathematics, economics, and informatics, and we needed something for development. So I
Ah,
needed to stay in the evenings in the lab, kind of, and then of course it became inconvenient when I just simply asked if we can do something in the family, so I can start developing also kind of on the weekends and all that stuff. And it was kind of the trigger for me. It wasn't clear for me which path I will choose back then. It could be pure
mhm.
informatics, but with that computer, it was basically then some years later, kind of for me also my main focus.
Okay. And what you started in computer science,
It was
informatics, or
applied mathematics, but the question was what to imply
applied?
to.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
it's always the
okay.
interesting question. So we had a lot of directions to go, and I switched in between, but basically informatics became my choice.
And what did you do during the study? Something interesting aside, like hobbies, or you hacked something, or was just school assignment?
I didn't hack. We have neural networks, which now are kind of popular. I even wrote some bachelor work about them, but I don't remember details. Or at least I tried, as I was also a huge fan of football, of soccer. I tried just to
Ah.
use machine learning just to predict who will be the champion of some championship, like Italian. Just put the data
Hmm.
from the previous ones, put some games from the starting season, and try to just to find out. It was of course very basic model, which didn't include something like injuries of the players, but something like so just try to give some input and try to get some output. There were some small programs to do that stuff that I used. Yeah, this was kind of the back then a bit of the interest from me, and then kind of then I as I
That did it worked. So was Italian the champion? Or?
it was within the champion. I was a fan of Milan, so I'd say Milan back then because I'm from Ukraine, and our famous player Andrei Shevchenko switched from Dynamo Kiev to them, and I became kind of the fan of that team. And I was interested whether they are will be capable of winning the championship. That they did several times when Andrei stayed there. Yeah, so that was kind of fun stuff.
Okay. So during your study, you mainly focused on school, so you did whatever was school related. So when you started, or which programming languages you used back then? This was interesting, actually.
So I started with Pascal, then it turned out to be Delphi, and then C++. So I think I missed the pure C. So I think that have been the two majors. And then in the year, I think 2000, I bought the book about Java. It was month before I moved to Germany. And it's clearly then outperformed what I saw. I didn't see all this memory stuff and all that. It was kind of something fresh, or at least another level of abstraction back then. And I would say I stayed somehow related to Java since 2000. So I follow closely, even if I maybe develop a bit less in the last year due to my managing role, but I still on this path and still kind of very tight.
So you are a manager now. So why we are talking? Usually, I only know only developers are allowed here.
Sorry, I forgot to tell you. Maybe it was my good feeling not to tell it to you. But I do a lot of development and do a lot of articles, but now mainly Java on Lambda. But maybe we will come to that later.
Cool. So which book was it? You remember that book?
It was, I think, it was one of the
German one?
Very popular one. There was the huge book. There was all the GUI stuff. So that it was in Russian. I bought it in Russian, but it was translated from something very popular. I think back then there have been 2 or 3 Java books, kind of the whole stuff.
Okay.
And it was
because why I'm asking, because the my first book was, I think, from David Flanagan about Java in a nutshell, and from O'Reilly. And then were from Sun Microsystems. They were the thick ones.
I think it was.
And the thick ones, there was the first, this was like Sun Microsystems Press, and the first half was ideas, and then it was Javadoc, basically. So the last half was just Javadoc printed, which was back then was very popular just to print out Javadoc. And then in German, there was like a Java ist auch eine Insel. So Java is also an island. And this was the most popular German one. This is also very thick, but no Javadoc, more reasonable book German. And then there was from Bruce Eckel one.
I think that was that.
Thinking in Java.
I think that was one of that, and Sun Microsystems book also. So that was kind of the books that taught me Java, or at least the basics, because it changed so much in that years. I mean, we started with one UI system, then Twin.
Why you learned Java? You knew C++, Delphi, and Pascal. So why you got the idea to learn Java?
It's very difficult to remember. So much time went by, but I think I was on some birthday, and the one was person invited who just finished the studies and took the job to program Java in the bank, and I didn't heard about that language, and he said, I'm quite convinced that it can become the future. And maybe I felt influenced by that, and I simply just went to the bookstore and bought it, just simply to test it out. What is that? And of course, it's kind of inspired me.
The same here. So I did lots of C++, and then someone told me, forgot C++. Java is the future. Not Java. It was even Oak. For unknown reasons, I was able to get the idea briefly before Java was released, and then use the 10B1 or something like this, or one exactly. I remember it was the B, and this is was also influenced from outside. And after the book, what did you do with Java? You started to use it, in your work, or you program
So I
something?
then moved to Germany and continued my studies. And then I searched for the job mainly as a student, and I searched for
Hmm.
the job where I can develop in Java. And I found that,
Hmm.
and I switched many jobs until I finished my studies 2004, and it was always kind of Java in my all the jobs, permanent jobs.
So you studied once again in Germany.
I,
So you studied
I
twice.
kind of I got my bachelor in Kiev in Ukraine, then I moved 2000
Hmm.
here. I needed to repeat a lot of stuff, and basically it was then I
Okay.
started to work in parallel and started to earn money, and
Hmm.
then I thought, so why I'm just repeating the stuff in Germany, and then 2 years later I decided to finish my studies to the master degree in Ukraine. It wasn't possible.
Hmm.
Internet was there, email, so I could exchange materials, and they are basically 2 years, and 1 year is writing the master thesis. So it was possible. So I then decided, and it was of course influenced that I enjoyed working and I enjoyed earning money comparing to the situation in Ukraine. And
Hmm.
then I really thought it will be easier for me to finish, because I mean, for our job, the skills are most important than some degree or something like
Yeah.
that. And I think it's still the same, and that's fine. And that was kind
Yeah.
of my path that I abandoned here, but finished there. And since 2004, I was basically kind of 100% employed. Uh, yeah.
And what you did? So you start during your study, you programmed in Java for the real thing, right? Professionally. So what was it?
So different stuff. So analyzing Excel things, so parsing Excel
Oh.
documents, all that stuff. It has been
Uh huh.
very,
With POI.
yeah. That was also, yeah.
Hmm.
Then also doing basic CRUD
And
operation.
HSV. You remember HSV? Horrible spreadsheet format.
Yeah,
This was a part of
yeah,
POI.
yeah.
HSV. Yeah.
Yeah. Then
Yeah.
doing basic CRUD operation. Yeah, basic database stuff with CRUD, all this GDBC stuff.
Hmm.
That was kind of the basic things, because I think that the frameworks like Hibernate, they started to appear 2002, 2003, as far as I remember. Spring or Interface
Hmm.
21, I think it was the name. I even had this book by Rod
Exactly.
Johnson. The name was Interface 21 back then. Yeah, it started to emerge a
Hmm.
bit later. Then I was kind of in my first permanent job. But yeah, it have been always some simple stuff that was needed to support kind of the permanent workers on different companies. And yeah, I think I switched the student job 3 or 4 times, because it have been quite difficult years for IT. This 2002, 2003, 2004. It was,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
right.
So as far
Uh-huh.
as I remember, I don't even think that all companies exist where I work. They maybe all are not there, and was also one of the reasons that I had
Hmm.
to leave.
The interesting part, this was I had some problems, getting contracts in 1999, 2000, and 2001 and 2002 become easier, and and the reason being is there in 1999 there were lots of company who had actually. So what I remember, for instance, right, I was involved in a project with e-commerce, and this was e-commerce for everything back then, and our product manager or whoever, like these, I think even CEO, told me, hey Adam, what we need is we need an virtual assistant, you know in the browser, which talks to you, and if you order, let's say, green socks, should suggest a white t-shirt, no based on your profile. And I say, look, this is impossible. We cannot do this, in browser, even not with applets. And he demanded, thin. You remember this thin client without any logic? So the thin client. And I say, I cannot do this. It's impossible. So I lost the contract because in the same room were two companies, and they claimed we did it all the time. No problem for us. So they got the job, and but they couldn't deliver. But
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine how to do that even. But after 2001, what happened then is, in Germany at least, the companies wanted to hear about problems. Is it doable or not? They were more reasonable, not just dreaming or doing something. And then I was skeptical, and I got actually the job. So for me, it was actually a good time. So 2001 and 2002, 2003, because if I said this could be problematic, the companies wanted to hear about the problems. Back then, 1999 and 2000, no one wanted to hear about problems. They just wanted you do something. You start programming and it will happen,
I
right?
remember those days of applets. I even did some basic stuff with that, and then AGB days. That drove people to madness. I think this home and
I like them. We can have we can have another because I was extremely pragmatic and it worked great. But I deleted lots of code. There were, the companies. There were frameworks like ABAX back then. So like in financial space, and there were like layers of layers about EGBs. I never got the idea. But if you did no reasonable job, they just worked. So it was okay.
JBoss, Enterprise.
JBoss happened exactly.
This all this stuff. So many web application server, enterprise servers, all that stuff. I think.
So you are also you also were J2E developer back then. J2E
this
and
I started heavily with my first job, 2004. We needed to look into that.
Was it a bank or was it?
It was Pironet, the company who produced in Cologne the CMS solutions, and I stayed there for 2 years, and I implemented kind of the search logic with Lucene, Apache Lucene back then. But
wow, not bad.
So that was kind of the stuff that we needed to index PDF files, Excel files, all that stuff, and then just to persist something to
skills which are really usable right now, right?
Again,
because chunking LLMs, those are exactly the same stuff.
It was not big data back then, but I remember that to find the parser to parse PDF reliably without throwing an error, it was madness. But it was the rise of open source. Just what's maybe unimaginable that such mature solution can come up from the community. That besides this Apache Commons, Apache loggings, we saw that, but really, I would say nearly enterprise-ready solutions like Hibernate, like Spring. That was, I think, back then, 2003, 2004, as far as I remember. Have been interesting days. I think Java had this until 1.5, this very heavy models with annotation. It became easier and much more accessible to develop. I think all the AGBs have been standardized and simplified, starting with annotations with 1.5, and now it's unimaginable to write all such a huge logic. But back then it was kind of okay. We can now that was kind of standard. So I also had to learn.
Why now everyone writes thousands of lines of Kubernetes. Is not that different, whether you have millions of YAML or then I would.
It's infrastructure as code is also a code, and sometimes we forget about it and shift somewhere else and say now I have 3 lines of code, but look in your cloud formation, whatever, SAM, CDK, and whatever, and you see then the whole code is
cloud
there.
formation is Okay, so you did a lot of JBoss and J2E, and you remained in the Java E space. So you started then with CDI and newer stuff, or what was the trajectory?
So 2006, I changed the job to the company where I'm currently also working since 18 years, and this is IP Labs in Bonn. But since 2000, it was startup back then and founded by Frank Thielen. So the name should be at least familiar here in the German region, people who saw Höhle der Löwen. He was one of the jury. So he's one of the big founders here in the region. It was kind of the first exit of him. He sold them the company to Fujifilm in 2008. But what we are doing,
Which company? Sorry,
I couldn't get you. We was sold by Frank to Fujifilm Europe.
Fujifilm,
they are based
okay.
in Düsseldorf.
But you said König der Löwen news?
Yeah, he was in the jury and nearly from the beginning, half of time. So,
but König der Löwen, this is like musical, right?
Höhle der Löwen. Sorry, Höhle der Löwen. I think the startups presents the ideas, this RTL show. They are now in the 25th edition or something like this.
Okay. I didn't knew that at all. Okay.
So Frank Thielen.
So I have to admit, 2003, I threw away my TV set. Since then, I have no idea what's going on. So if this was before 2003, maybe I can remember.
I think 2015 or something like this.
Okay, this is what I have no idea about.
Very known.
Okay, this is like TV show about startups.
So they can
right?
pitch ideas. People come and pitch ideas, can get an investment.
Hey, cool.
And all that stuff. It's going since 10 years. Yeah, but kind of the Frank was one of those people. Yeah, we are basically doing software for designing and purchasing of the photo products like calendars, photo book of the year, prints, posters. So everywhere where can you put the photo. And as I joined the company back 2006, a huge backend built on top of Spring Hibernate. So it was G2E stack, basically that in the data center business. And we stayed and developed with that, of course, upgrade.
And the name was IP Labs. Interesting,
Point
because
Labs.
IP, you know.
It was international picture
Okay.
meant, but of course, if you hear IP, then you see something. Of course, it's the associations are different with that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of continued until 2016. We were in the data centers, even around the globe, because Fujifilm brought their own customers around the world, totally different data centers with different hardware vendors for the same purpose, like Nginx or F5 for load balancers. And then kind of 2017, we started our journey to migrate the stuff to AWS. And after that, kind of Lambda stuff, and this is where I'm currently mostly interested in all those topics, how to make Java accessible basically on AWS Lambda, less on containers, but basically on AWS Lambda.
This is incredibly interesting, because you do similar stuff what I am doing, and then was not even aware of that. And what I also found out that you are the Java user group Bonn leader, right?
I'm one of the co-organizers. We have two more people, Christian Stein, who is working at Oracle, maybe should be known persons. He's my neighbor, 15 meters away, Christian Stein. Yeah, he was the JUnit 5 committer, but now he joined Oracle since 2 years. Yeah, so we're kind of neighbors and good friends and organizers.
Yeah, we had a podcast with him. We had a nice conversation about the build tool from him.
He's working in that area, I think, at Oracle. So he has some interesting insights. Not always allowed to talk about this, so that's why. But yes, I'm just in this Java user group Bonn. I'm also AWS community builder and serverless category since several years, so this path is crossed sometimes. So I also know that you are working the similar scene. You had a podcast with Mark Sales about SnapStart on the day it was released. As far as I know, I'm quite actively working with Mark and other people from AWS. Now, there's some amazing people working there. Volker Simonis, very known person, Roman Könke. Probably you know them. They are from Germany.
Okay.
Alexei Shipelev, Shenandoah developer. Worked previously at Oracle and Red Hat now also. So that's kind of very interesting what's happening. And you know probably Goran Apacic.
Oh, didn't knew that Alex works for AWS right now.
He's working. You probably know Goran Apacic.
Yes,
because we are also kind of, we meet each other on AWS community days or events, and he told me that he visited your workshop in Munich days back or something like that, and you had interesting conversation about how micro Lambda should be on that stuff. He has his own opinion, so I kind of a bit know. So the world is closed.
For me it's similar. What's interesting is because you mentioned the EJBs and stuff like that. What I really liked Java EE and EJB, but I took it to the extreme. So for me, I only was interested in business logic, and I was absolutely not interested in application servers. So I said, okay, we should focus, on the business logic, then and don't be dependent on. Back then, I used a lot Glassfish, Payara, Whitefly, WebSphere less, because it was terrible back then, the classic, but WebLogic a lot. And a lot of small servers, but we never were dependent on the servers, right? So we only focus on the business logic. And during Corona, what happened is lots of my clients had to go to the cloud for various reasons. So the reasons were reasonable, right? So it's like HA and data center too small and stuff like that. So okay. So and then it was like, what do you do right now? Because on premise we had OpenShift. I was very happy with OpenShift, Rancher, so everything was on premise great, right? I mean, this is like you push the Docker and you are done, basically. So it fit perfectly. But in the cloud, I say, look, and they say some of my clients said, okay, we can install OpenShift in the cloud. It's like, yeah, you're a bit crazy. I mean, then we have two clouds, right? So we have the real cloud and then OpenShift. We have managed both, and means why we should do this, right? And then the serverless surprisingly, the serverless for me is actually absolutely compatible with the idea of application servers, right? So forget about the infrastructure and fully focus on business logic. And this is why if I go to the cloud, the first thing to me is serverless, because it's what I always thought. And then Lambda is the obvious thing, right? So this is how I do actually all my projects right now are Lambda based. Never use Spring because as Lambda it was slower than Quarkus, for instance. So I used always Quarkus, and yeah, right now before we talked, I committed some code actually which runs as Lambda. And what I do a lot is like it's called Fed Lambda, and or Lambda Lith. There are lots of names, and you can do this with Java perfectly because I have projects with thousands of classes in one Lambda, and it still works fine. So this is what I'm doing, and costs optimizations are big thing. So what we do, I almost never use RDS or Postgres. I like Postgres a lot, of course. I use it on premise, but in the cloud we use S3 or DynamoDB usually. And also we don't use Kafka. We use more Kinesis S3 or SNS for the same reasons, because it is, I don't have to care about the infrastructure. So right now in the mode Java, I know as the business high level programming language. Infrastructure, I use CDK v2 everywhere because it is perfect. How to call it? Synergy with Maven and Maven repository, so it works just perfectly. And this basically it. So for me, it was the clear path for the only way after Java E and J2E and all the servers. So in the spirit of J2E, the next thing is serverless. There is nothing in between. So this is my short introduction.
Yeah, this is how also now perceive the new development. Of course, as we migrated our application, we migrated more or less per lift and shift, but added some elasticity to the stuff. But all the new stuff that we do it serverless first, for the same reasons that you explained. And just if we see that it becomes too much expensive, or the workloads are more steady, or certain workloads or certain functions, that we can use also serverless containers, something like this. But I really like not too much to take care of the infrastructural stuff. A job what we a bit needed to do is a bit to lose Java as a programming language for Lambda, because we started with serverless 5-6 years ago, and there have not been this maturity with GraalVM native image or SnapStart. This is something that is basically in the last year. So we'll do a lot of Node.js TypeScript stuff. Me personally, this is my personal area of interest, where I release a lot of blogs or try things out. This is basically where we are. We still have some Java on Lambda, but this is a lot of private research, how we can use Java with Lambda, also with Spring Boot. I have another article series, and also we also try to do with DynamoDB, but sometimes for certain workloads it's better or more convenient to use something like Aurora or Aurora Serverless, with different trade-offs, how with that connection management towards relational databases. This is also kind of the area of the research, just to find
the connection management. You can make it work, right, with RDS proxy. The problem is I spend my time
data API
less or data API actually, but the difference is between us is I spend more time in projects which are more short-lived. And if you start with RDS, and I always say you can easily spend 1 week just exercising backup, then with the DNS dense with the application servers so this is, and if you build a product, you can easily invest one week for that, right? But if you're in projects, not so. But in DynamoDB or S3 is nothing to do, right? So you have already your data API, the HTTP, and you are ready to go. And you don't have to pay, because an RDS is also expensive if you don't do it right. I mean, with backup is twice as expensive, and DynamoDB and S3 is pay as you go, right? So this is. But what I'm curious, Node.js, is it not too slow? I mean, from money perspective, because Java from performance, raw performance is faster, and in my Java projects, this is even, we don't even use GraalVM. So we use pure Java, Corretto 21, and we are good to go. So there's we never use GraalVM in my Lambda project. So I'm curious about because you are not losing money with Node.js right now.
No, so of course this JavaScript programming language allows you also to do the front end work and back end with Node.js. That's
Yeah, sure.
huge benefit.
But operational
Yeah,
money, I mean,
the,
performance, raw performance of
uh,
Node.js versus Java.
Java is much quicker with warm startups and slow with the
Yeah.
cold starts. But it's of course then the question how
But you are not paying for cold
we
start,
are
right?
not paying, but of course it's then the performance itself, or if this is a latency sensitive application, we are in the latency sensitive
Yeah, yeah.
application. And
But you could fix that, with various tricks. But run from the operational perspective, I mean, from cost perspective, I think you at least, giving away 30% of the costs, right? At least.
might be, but currently, so the Lambda costs are not the biggest one in the serverless world. But just if I look at the cost of the observability and all that stuff, that's if we do it completely, not with
Okay.
sampling and all that stuff. These are of course the things like also CloudWatch is kind of expensive. So the Lambda itself
Yeah, of course. But you get the cost.
isn't.
CloudWatch, you always
Yeah.
have to, this is regardless what you're doing if you're logging.
With DynamoDB, of course, if it's a small application, it's fair, easy to do, but NoSQL is sometimes tricky to get right, especially if you add queries later or something like this, and then you need JSIs and all that stuff, and then the cost might also explode, especially if you're on demand scaling, which is, of course, default. If you start small, you don't want to provision this read and writes capacity units, it just kills the cloud thing, yeah, because I need to manage
Exactly.
basically capacity, or I needed to manage. But of course, yeah, you need to understand your workload. Sometimes the things I needed, all these debates around single table design or multiple table designs. I wasn't a big fan of the pure single table design because if the things belong together, put them together. If not, just split the tables. It's much cleaner as to put unrelated stuff in one table and then very crazy key conversions, and that's the stuff. So but it's of course, I think many things come with experience, and if
Mhm.
people are experienced, and it's of course the question, if you are doing the project, who is the maintaining the project later? If the people are skilled in the stack, then it's okay. If you are doing this by yourself,
Yeah.
might be okay, but sometimes you need to hand something over, and yeah, it might be
Mhm.
difficult. But I'm kindly amazed by SnapStart. It's managed. That's basically checkbox, and in many situations, especially with the
Mhm.
standard stake with DynamoDB, with using of priming, you can achieve things. You can reduce the cold starts. The warm starts will be comparable. It's not the technology to reduce them, basically, but yeah, that's. I think it's really cool
Yeah, but
innovation.
warm starts with Quarkus is like we have some endpoints which are easy. So then you get response time for under 10
Yeah,
milliseconds
so the
with
DynamoDB.
Lambda
Yeah,
with
that's
from Java.
Java.
I mean, without
Yeah.
DynamoDB. With DynamoDB is of course a little bit. I'm speaking about what if you have a Quarkus with REST interface and micro profile and you just hit it, then the response in under 10
Yeah, the
milliseconds.
warm starts are fine.
And if you talk to DynamoDB, you get usually consistent
Yeah.
response time under 10 milliseconds as well. So I would say 20 milliseconds with Java is absolutely possible to talk to the
Yeah,
backend.
that's why I sometimes don't understand this debate that people are saying Rust. I saw a lot of metrics that for warm starts, Rust and Java are quite comparable. You can do this type that it's comparable. For cold starts, maybe not.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
comp.
and I know that
Yeah,
AWS they rely heavy on Java for all their services, but they
yeah,
have rewritten a
yes.
bit of Lambda control plane to Rust to gain some additional milliseconds because this is what they need to optimize that startup times and all that placement service, just that we can benefit from, but a huge chunk of uh, Lambda logic and all the stuff is still Java, and that for reasons.
Yeah, but on AWS, I mean they have scale like crazy. So even a few milliseconds in ROS would make sense. And even write in assembly would make sense for them because I mean whatever they do at that scale, they save energy and money. So I would
Yeah, of
say,
course, they need to optimize
yeah.
that so that we benefit. They need to optimize costs and all that stuff just to place
Mhm.
all these firecracker micro VMs on the right bare metal instance that will be on the hood. But but yeah, with SnapStart, I think AWS delivered something. We have Crack on another side. many people think
Mhm.
that are similar,
Just
similar,
similar
but they're
technology.
completely
Mhm.
unrelated. I mean, SnapStart uses Crack
Yeah.
API for hooks, but it's only API. There is nothing Creo and Crack in that.
Yeah.
But the things are similar. But of course, what AWS did, they accommodated it to the life cycle of Lambda function. Yeah, so that the snapshot is taken during
Mhm.
the deployment. It impacts deployment time, but it doesn't
Mhm.
impact
Mhm.
invocation time, and then only restore. This is something that it's very difficult to do. I tried Crack on Lambda. The people on AWS told me it will not work. You cannot do it. You can't make it work. I made it work. Very poor performance, and it's very difficult. But I could restore at least one thing with Crack and Creo. And beyond,
you restored one
yeah, I
Lambda
restored. They told me that the
once.
Firecracker VM doesn't support Creo
Mhm.
completely, so I will not make it work. But I made it work. That I did the snapshot.
Custom runtime, right?
Uh, how I did? Yes, I think I did it even with Docker by
Mhm.
simply snapshotting outside of Lambda, and then I started from the snapshot Lambda.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
in the Docker, that
Mhm.
was the way, because it's very difficult to do the snapshot within the 10-second initialization phase, but it was possible to set up the stack on Cloud9 similar instances with the Linux 2023, and then do
Mhm.
the snapshot, and then simply push the snapshot and the command restore from just as a Docker image. But of course, it's such a workaround. I needed to take care of many things. And to be honest, it doesn't work very well because, for example,
And this is the opposite of
it,
serverless, right? What you did, because
yeah, but it was kind of, I was curious, will it be possible? But I then figure out, and during the for example, the restore phase, all the environment variables came from this snapshot, and I defined them on
Mhm.
AWS like in the
Mhm.
template, and they were completely overwritten. Like the name of DynamoDB table that I passed as a Lambda variable name,
Mhm.
it was then overridden after the snapshot was
Yeah,
restored.
exactly.
And it's not a workable solution, to be honest. But it was simply curious, and I just wanted more kind of how to appreciate what AWS did with this completely managed SnapStart, and how
Mhm.
much they take, because you can take Crack and use it on AKS or Fargate or something like this. That's okay,
Mhm.
yeah, because SnapStart is only for Lambda. They don't
Mhm.
will not help currently in the container.
Maybe for the listeners, what crack is, coordinated restore at checkpoint. The first time I remember the acronym correctly, this is a technology invented by Azure Systems, and what it is, you can in Java as an API, and you can launch Java and then say more or less freeze, and then the Java will create a snapshot and memory image, and the next time you boot from memory image, and in the Quarkus case, usually if you start Quarkus, you will see all the boot statements and all Quarkus is up and running. And if you do this from with Crack, it's already there, so you won't see how Quarkus boots because it already loads the booted Quarkus to the to RAM, and then you start the ready to use Quarkus. And SnapStart is from AWS, and this is more sophisticated because they distribute the images across availability zones. So in Frankfurt, for instance, it happens 3 times because Frankfurt has, I think, 3 availability zones. And it will like train, your image several times, and then it creates the memory image, encrypts the image, distributes the image to availability zones. The next time your Quarkus on Lambda or your Lambda won't boot, rather than it will just start from image, right? Which it's just twice as fast as without
It can be
SnapStart.
65%, depends on the what you can prime, like
Mm-hmm.
preload all this. For example, DynamoDB client, you can
Mm-hmm.
pre-initialize. There is Jackson Marshall in there that cost one time per life
Mm-hmm.
cycle. But basically, yeah, Crack is based on Creo, which is Linux technology to move containers around, available since 12 years or something like this. But it's more kind of snapshot of one processor. Basically, the
Mm-hmm.
SnapStart makes the snapshot of the whole Firecracker micro VM, which is underneath the Lambda, so the whole environment. With that, and as
Mm-hmm.
AWS controls Firecracker, it's their own technology. They know
Mm-hmm.
how to do this stuff. what's really interesting is I watched the talks how they
Vadim, wir müssen clarify one thing because it's common misconception. So Lambda it does not run on containers, not at all. It is more similar to crazy fast virtual VM, I would say. And this is called Firecracker. So it means if you have two Lambdas and they work at the same time, you have two independent processes which are complete silo, which are completely isolated. So Lambda is even more secure than Docker, I would say, because Docker shares some stuff and Lambda doesn't share anything. So you share nothing with the Firecracker, right?
That's exactly.
And what you said right now, that the entire silo gets, stored on disk or frozen or whatever.
Yeah, the whole micro.
And the next time, not only the Java, the entire micro VM, that means the Java virtual machine, Quarkus, and the underlying Firecracker.
The whole
they are serialized
and read all the stuff, the VM state, so everything registers, everything will be part of the snapshot,
which is incredible technology, right?
Yeah, it's not very easy. So sometimes, I do some snapshot and restore, and it works. But underneath of that, so the first iteration, such a snapshot takes 30 gigs. So if you would like them to download and restore 30 gigs, you will not be below 1 second. It's not possible. And how AWS solved that, they kind of introduced this low-level tiered cache, where they simply split that snapshot into the chunks, and they see that there are so many common chunks because everybody uses newest Linux operating system there automatically. Nearly everybody uses either Java 21 or 17, so there are common bits, and these bits are even common for everybody using that. Yeah, and they share those bits, and the differences is in your business logic in your Lambda function. Yeah, and this is kind of the cache that will be filled in these chunks with your information, and they have local caches for these bits that are common, and they try like the video player. If you first try to use that, you don't need the whole image. They only the whole snapshot being restored. They stream to you what you are currently required, and then lazy load all that stuff. And only with that it was possible for them to achieve kind of the restore time that was, I would say, depending on the use case, double as quick as the normal call starts, because otherwise it doesn't make kind of any sense. But it's of course a very, very complex technology beyond the scenes with all that stuff, and I think it can be improved. Interestingly enough, it's currently only available for Java, but the whole questions may arise also in the .NET world as well and all others. So let's see. Since 2 years we have only that, but I personally see it's really incredible just to do that it works reliable and all that stuff. But of course there are some limitations. And interesting enough, all this, if you restore all these images, snapshots, then they are all unique, and this breaks the cryptography. Yeah, all these UIDs are the same. So AWS provided patches for OpenSSL, for Java itself, even for Linux, introducing the interface that will be called on restore, so that this uniqueness can be restored once again. Otherwise, every machine is the same talking outside, and it's also not the solution. So I personally don't know how much time did it take for AWS to implement that, but I think it was the work of several years. Yeah, because it sounded simply.
Yeah,
so
for
for
sure.
us, it's only checkbox, but I even think they started and they didn't know can they achieve the results that might be better than normal call starts. Yeah, with that, it was probably a huge journey for them to announce that, but it was also required because Java so great community, but sometimes call start matters, and you use fed Java Lambda functions. Of course, there are much more things to load during the startup, this is of course increases it makes things easier, because I also don't like to have millions of small nano functions. It's also the nightmare to manage, and how you design the system that it works. Sometimes you just at least want to start bigger maybe, and fed Lambda is okay. But now with that SnapStart and this priming technique, that you can additionally prime things, load things, additional classes, because first class loading, lazy loading, it takes time. It can be even seconds. Yeah, we compared what does it mean if I simply do a fake call to DynamoDB before I do the snapshot, it reduces then the restore time up to 600 milliseconds, because the HTTP client needs to be initialized. It's Apache by default. Jackson Marshall needs to be initialized first. These are things that are been built for long-living applications, like web applications, and not for very short-living Lambda functions. So quite interesting. But I also saw I can use even Spring Boot with that SnapStart and with priming, and have at least normal results. They are higher than without framework, of course. Bit higher cold starts with Spring Boot. I measured P90 was a bit higher than 1 second, something like this. So several hundred milliseconds more than without Spring Boot. But there are companies that are heavily on Spring Boot, and they say we don't migrate to Lambda if we need to sacrifice Spring Boot, and it's now becomes possible, at least. Yeah, GraalVM, it's another story. It's has its own complexities but benefits, and I think you can have the lowest possible cold starts with them, and even warm starts with them. But it's also a lot of things that you need to think about.
Yeah, and GraalVM is exactly, is also not really serverless, because then you own the image, right? If you do nothing, then an AWS patches the corrector for you, the JDK, OpenJDK. But if you have your own image, you have your own image. You have to care about your own image. It's a little bit less,
of course, it's custom runtime that you need to build, and you need CI/CD for that. Sometimes you build so many Lambda functions in parallel, and on my machine it takes 6 to 10 gigabytes of memory to build such a GraalVM native as a custom image that can be used for Java. If I need hundreds of builds in parallel, it puts pressure on my CI/CD. It's of course the thing about reflection, because you need to, ahead of time compilation is closed world. You need to put things into this native image, and sometimes there is kind of dynamic class loading, so you need the system to GraalVM to be aware of this. And sometimes you don't control all your open source project, and the stuff can be changed and you are not aware, and somebody loads something dynamically with the update and it breaks your stuff. So the question is how I test that. These are another challenges.
The cool story about Quarkus is, because the Quarkus already solved that with the extensions. So if you're using extensions, you know that it's actually you can use GraalVM always, except of course if you don't rely on extensions and you just just add an open source project from the internet, then you have a problem. But regarding the coming back to the fat lambdas or big lambdas, so my observation is in Java, it actually doesn't matter how big the Lambda is regarding business logic. So you should be a little bit careful with dependencies. But if you just, have your business code, whether you have one class or 500, it doesn't matter from a startup time. So, but loaded. Of course, if you add
load it exactly what you need.
Yeah, the problem is you must not add all the jars from the from the Java history, and the SDKs from AWS should be also careful. So don't add SDK all, then you get 100 megs or whatever. So this is
I measured the package size matters indeed, and also with SnapStart. Yeah, so I just went from my basic application was 18 megabytes. I added some dependencies that I even didn't use as a jar files, like X-ray and all that stuff, made it 15 megabytes, and it cost me, even with SnapStart, 200 or 300 milliseconds of cold start. So these are dependencies. Of course, we need to be careful. And then if we see that this can split, then maybe split. But of course, if everybody uses the same dependencies like Lambda events, like DynamoDB, and these are only classes that we add, then of course they will be loaded on demand. So the paths that are not invoked in that Lambda function, that they won't be loaded. It adds some kilobytes to the Lambda function, but kilobytes doesn't matter. It's about megabytes.
Yeah, and for me, it's the simplicity. What I get with one fat Lambda is like transactional update. So either I update or not. This is so. What usually happens in my projects? What I'm doing is I have an Maven archive with all the lambdas. So, and we have one, a lambda which usually relies on CloudFront API gateway, load balancer. So like, the HTTP endpoint, synchronous lambda, and the others are asynchronous. And the synchronous lambda ships with Quarkus always in my case. And the others has nothing. It's just Pojo without any framework. And now it comes. So I deploy with CDK the same archive several times if I would like to have more Lambdas. So even the Pojo Lambdas get, the entire baggage from the others, but it doesn't matter a lot. So, and the smaller Lambdas I even ship, I think, with 500 max RAM. So they have then a quarter of a CPU, I think, because 2 gigs is one. CPU. So there is not even a quarter, and it works fine. So I would say productivity, simplicity, and how to call it, even a single CI/CD is a golden, because I don't have to care about the order of deployments. There is no metrics tests. So it is a huge benefit, actually.
Of course, measure the performance. It might be okay. Might be other cases, but I also prefer to start bigger than smaller. I would say I can make it smaller later, but from small to big, it usually becomes much more difficult because it's so much distributed patterns. Then coming back is sometimes, from my experience, a bit more work.
So it means now you are becoming less and less manager and coming back to Java again, right? So this is what I understood after the discussion.
I would like to stay technical, and of course, if you talk to the developers, they would like to see somebody understands the stuff. Yeah, and of course, cloud world is so quick, and of course, I would like to keep up with that stuff. Of course, I'm not dealing with that 40 hours per week, but that helps me to understand and try out concept. And I stayed with Java. I also have a lot of talks about serverless on AWS in general. So there are other things where we present our solution from the architectural point of view, why those event-driven patterns and not those, where the asynchronity makes sense and where we have difficulties. So I like talking and I like sharing the knowledge. But
are you allowed to talk about asynchronous behavior and difficulties and stuff like that? So about your use cases?
Yeah, I talked publicly on Go2 and Go2 this year about this stuff. So I shared.
Yeah, super cool. So I will re-invite you back, and we can have a chat about that if you like.
Yeah, of course, we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
because if there are no NDAs, so we can have a nice chat, about serverless and asynchronous behavior.
Of course, of course. Maybe I can also, my colleague can join if you would like. We are just
No, this is impossible because the infrastructure is not set up for that, and I get crazy during editing. So it's always 2 persons, so otherwise it's unmanageable for me. It's just fun. The podcast became popular, but it was just for me a hack to meet nice people, because otherwise I have no time at conferences to have a chat. So this is actually my way to stay connected.
But you write articles, still write articles for Java magazine, or because
no more, because no more time, right? So time is the problem with lots of projects going on, and I have to find time. So I do a little bit more YouTube videos because they go faster. So I have the daily Java shorts, for instance, just for fun, 60 seconds with Java. And I will write an article, but I get lots of requests for articles. I wrote, for AWS an article, but
I saw one about.
Yeah, but the article there's always a lot to do and lots of deadlines. So I'm, projects are chasing me, my clients, So
understandable.
Yeah, but it's good stuff, right? So good, yeah, and especially the serverless in Java becomes more and more popular because companies can save money. And if someone can save money these days, so it becomes interesting. So where people can find you on the internet, you I don't know, Twitter, whatever it is, Blue Sky, YouTube, LinkedIn,
I
GitHub.
can send you the links if you would like to publish, but basically with my surname, I'm very easy to find. I'm basically on LinkedIn, Twitter, Dev2, where is my blog post, but I can send all the links. I'm not on the Blue Sky, and not on. I was on Mastodon, but I stopped doing this stuff. So still Twitter, LinkedIn, Dev2. These are 3 main places. A bit of Think, but
what is your Twitter handle? Just say the Twitter. I will put everything to the show notes, of course.
I can send you. This is V for Vadim, the first name, and then my complete surname as a one word.
Yeah. And there is your surname is?
Katsulkin,
say it.
So you see that.
Katsulkin.
Yeah, so that.
Katsulkin. And this is with Z.
With Z.
Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. It was fun. I hope it was a good choice not to have an agenda, because it was a nice
It
conversation,
was
right?
my
Highly structured.
first experience without having an agenda, but I that's your show, that's your rule, so I stick to that. And yeah, sometimes it's even much better simply to have a unconference format or
Yeah.
something like this. So simply just
Yeah.
going
Do
left, right.
I'm not a manager. I'm not a manager. I have no idea what agenda is. You ask me for agenda, so I was a little bit afraid, like what I should write. It's like hello and bye. This I can give
Yeah.
you, and what happens in between, who knows,
Yeah.
right?
I
So
thought you will not invite me anymore, but okay, yeah, we managed to do that. Yeah.
yeah. And next time, even less agenda, except maybe problems and asynchronous and serverless is always good topics.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for
Thank
inviting
you.
me. So we finally met. It's interesting. We are working in the similar area. Of course, you are more from a
Mhm.
freelancer perspective, but yeah, I saw you at several conferences. I think InfoShare in Danzig last year, Gdańsk. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
just
hmm
sometimes we have even talks in parallel, but that's first time that we're actively
And I will
talking.
come to your Java user group. I visited, I think, Bonn once, but it was at Sun Microsystems Day still,
Mhm.
and maybe we can do it
So we
again.
are now, for example, looking for speakers for December, and we are doing this bi-monthly. Then the next one will be February. So if you would like, we can establish contact. And
Try this. Okay, thank you a lot. See you next time.
thanks a lot, Adam. See you also next time.